Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to chat about films either current or classic. And this week we're going with two, not one, but two current films. We're going to be reviewing Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and Dear Evan Hansen, which might sound like a weird mix-up, mashup, whatever you want to call it, but we're going to have a fun conversation at the end about who's the bigger monster, Carnage, Venom, Evan Hansen. We're going to talk it out, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. Be sure to jump into the live chat with us as we're recording this episode. Say hello, weigh in with your thoughts. We want to hear from you. Looks like we've already got a few folks on board with us. Good to see you. Welcome. Before we jump into our movie conversations, plural, since we're doing two movies, let me introduce you to my fabulous co-hosts. Jim Pugliafago is here with us in the virtual studio. Hey, sweetheart.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hi. Yes, I am. Thank you. And I'm excited to be back with you guys. I know we took a week off, but now we've got two movies stacked up, and that's going to be fun. Both of these, I think, are going to be really fun to talk about individually, and then maybe we have a little fun with it at the end.
I agree. And Will Lindis is here with us as well. Welcome, Will.
Hey, Brad. Hey, Jim. Hey, listeners. I'll be honest, with both of these movies, there's been a lot of pretty polarizing reactions out there in the world. And I'll be honest, I've been waiting all week just to pick your brains.
That was a good Venom impression.
Are you going to eat them?
I want to eat the brains, Eddie. I don't even. It's not even like an impression as much as I'm just doing like a dumb gruff voice. But you know,
that's all Tom Hardy does. So
it's fair.
If he can make a sexy gruff voice, so can you, Will. It's permissible. So we have a lot to talk about on the show this week. I think we're just going to go ahead and dive into our first film review, which is going to be Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Jim, Will, are you ready to talk about this film?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah. It's going to be a good day.
It's not a good day. It's a great day, Jim.
Today's going to be a great day.
Today is going to be a great day.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Can we talk? Can we talk about Free Guy?
Are you tipping your hat a little bit, Will?
Maybe not. We'll see.
All
Who's
right,
the better blue shirt guy, Free Guy or Dear Evan Hansen?
There you go. Well, for those who are unfamiliar with our format, we're going to talk about Venom, Let There Be Carnage, completely spoiler-free for about 10 minutes before we open up the can of spoilers. We'll give you a fair warning before we do that. So if you haven't seen the film and you want to step away, of course, you can do so. But feel free to hang out with us if you're on the fence about seeing this one. Maybe you were kind of so-so on the first film. You're wondering if this one's any better. We're going to give you some of our spoiler-free thoughts and impressions before we get to Spoiler Town, so just be aware. But all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. All right, so Will, as our resident Marvel expert, I realize this film is Marvel adjacent, question mark? Do us a favor, if you don't mind, briefly kick us off with just a short description of what this film is, what it's about, and what did you think? Was this worth going out and seeing in theaters, doing the whole streaming thing when you can? What were your thoughts?
Absolutely. So this is Venom, Let There Be Carnage, the second of the Venom movies, which exist sort of in the Sony part of the Marvel universe, which is separate from the Disney part of the Marvel universe. So when we're talking about things, we're talking about sort of a self-contained product. This film is about Eddie Brock, who is a reporter, journalist, tabloid guy who in the first movie became the host of an alien symbiote named Venom, went on a murderous rampage, well, the symbiote did, until the two of them developed equilibrium and decided, hey, maybe we can use this murder stuff for good, taking out the bad people. Venom Let There Be Carnage picks up in the aftermath of all of that. Eddie Brock is trying to reignite his career. And so he gets this job interviewing this serial killer named Cletus Cassidy, played by Woody Harrelson. One thing leads to another, and soon Cletus Cassidy becomes the host of another symbiote, this one called Carnage, and goes on a murderous rampage of his own. And it's up to Eddie and Venom, who have some issues of their own to sort through, to try to stop everything. This movie is it's so hard to describe the big thing about this movie, because it's really bad, right? Like, there's a lot of like awful dialogue. Like, the dialogue is just absolutely atrocious in this. Like, it is not written well from a dialogue perspective. There are so many silly decisions that feel like it both wants to attract like an edgier Deadpool adjacent audience, while also steering away from more of the like aggressively violent and gory stuff. So it feels like it wants to be both and is neither. I mentioned the dialogue. The characters say some of the hokiest things that like probably look way better on paper than they do actually, sound coming out of someone's mouth. And not all of the CGI looks really good. I'm not a big fan of the Woody Harrelson role in this. It felt, I don't know. I tend to like decently like Woody Harrelson and things. This felt a little lazy. The Michelle Williams role, I had the same issue with in the first one as it's here. It feels out of place. But for all of that, it's not boring. I was entertained through this by some of the really silly decisions. I had fun with this. So I recognize that there's so many things that are not good about this movie, but there are so many like better movies that I would never want to watch again. And I could see myself watching this objectively worse film on a second time, because I can at least get some joy out of it. Not even from like a laughing at the film perspective. It's not that. It's not that at all. It's just sort of like succumbing to the silliness and just going along for the ride. So, I mean, do I recommend you go out into the world and see this one? That's going to be up to you. There's some reasons why you might want to, some of which we'll probably talk about in spoilers. But there's a lot of reasons why this might be one just to sort of wait for until later. The best thing about this film is if you watch it going into it with the perspective of, this is an LGBTQ coming of age romance story that also has aliens and monsters and carnage in it. If you come at it from that perspective, it's actually a much better movie than it would be if you look at it through any other lens. So I don't know if I recommend it or not. It's bad. It's good. It's one of the most fun things I've watched in a while, and also it's one of the most objectively terrible things I've watched in a while. I don't know. Watch it if any of that sounds interesting to you.
So it's a wreck-a-mish.
And which movie were you talking about? Which are the two movies we were talking about there?
oh, we'll get there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Will, thanks so much for weighing in with your initial thoughts and for keeping spoilers out for those who maybe haven't seen the film yet. Jim, how about for you? What did you think of this film? And was it worth going out and seeing in theaters? What do you think?
Look, I mean, it was 90 minutes long, which 97 minutes, I guess. And to me, I think that is the actual number one thing about this movie. There was 90 minutes long. It flew along in the sense, not that less is more, not the sense that I wanted to get out of there right away. Because I think, like you, Will, I was fairly entertained by this movie. Like, it was 97 minutes. It was packed with stuff that kind of kept me interested in the film. But for me, I agree with what you say on the dialogue, but I wish we had more about the characters. I mean, Tom Hardy, Woody Harrelson, and Michelle Williams don't get to play people. Like, they're kind of like, at least the Tom Hardy and Woody Harrelson character. What is it? help me again. Cletus
Cletus
Cassidy.
Cassidy.
Cletus Cassidy and Eddie Brock. Also kind of come across as caricatures. And those are two really, really, really good actors we have in there. And then to see Michelle Williams, who I think is one of the best female actors we have going right now, in a role where she's very much in the background here, I think, kind of bugged me a little bit. But I get it. You know, it's a big paycheck for them. It's good marquee names for Marvel. And this is a Marvel film, right? I think I did see the Marvel thing in front of the movie.
In association with Marvel.
It's the same way. The same way remember when we would talk about the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, how they were Marvel, but they weren't part of like the MCU because of the deal that Sony had made once upon a time. Even though they've made an agreement with the Spider-Man character itself to share royalties, Venom still exists in his own little pocket, not owned by MCU, but still under the Marvel umbrella. It's inside baseball.
Marvel adjacent is the term that I tend to use.
Gotcha. We had a comment in here, and I think it was from Sean. And I'm not sure exactly where it went in my feed, but he said something about should have been made an R-rated film, so that the character of Carnage and Venom can kind of do more. Here you have two characters that basically eat people, right? And I don't know if they ate a single person in the movie. I don't remember either that or they did, and it was just done so so cleanly that it didn't come off as having any impact at all. And that kind of bugged me through the movie too. I would say, yeah, I mean, there are comic book fans that are going to see this movie no matter what I say, that's for sure. But I mean, it's a fun 90-minute popcorn movie. You're not going to waste a whole evening or a whole afternoon going to see this one. It did very well at the box office, so that I think it does have a base of fans. So for me, I say, yeah. I mean, if you're into the Venom characters and this kind of whole universe or adjacent universe to Spider-Man and Venom and Carnage, I'd say this is a movie you probably have to see. For everybody else, it comes across to me as kind of a bland version of, I think, what it could have been. I would have liked to have seen it lean into the violence a little bit more. And I mean, Venom is a vulgar character, and to see him kind of scaled back on that, from being, what's the word I'm looking for? Not just vulgar, but he's a very like unfiltered character, right? But still, you get the sense he's being filtered by the rating of the movie, PG-13, and I think that kind of hinders it for me anyway.
All right. So is this a recommend or not?
I would say, yeah, it's a recommend for those of you who are fans of kind of this universe and this series. For everybody else, I don't think there's anything in here that is going to make it stand out.
All right. Well, that is fair. Thank you so much for sharing. I know that walks
the line, but that's the way this one is.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts. There's a lot happening in the chat right now. We can't read everything always, but our very own Mike Lovins, who's been on the show many times in the past, and who has always been a dear friend. We love him to death. He says it was fun, and hey, it wasn't Evan Hansen. Not to tip my hat with regards to Evan Hansen, but I will say I had a lot more fun with Venom, Let There Be Carnage than I did with Venom. Than I did with Venom, the first Venom film. I thought this one was much more fun, but also I had more fun with this than dear Evan Hansen. But I mean, they're entirely different things. So, your mileage is going to vary there naturally anyway. But I do think that's the key point for me is I had fun with this. Is it a great movie? No. Is it a good movie? Questionable. But at least I had some fun with it. I've been a fan of the Venom character ever since I was introduced to him in the 1990s Spider-Man animated series. I'd never heard of Venom before, and then Spider-Man gets the alien symbiote that becomes his costume, and then he rejects it, and it becomes Venom. And obviously, this Venom in the movies did not originate with Spider-Man as he did in the animated series or even in some versions of the comic book. But I still like this relationship that Venom and Eddie have developed. And it was nice to see some carry forwards from the first film, as well as some deepening of that relationship. I'm eager to get into spoilers because there's a whole lot I want to talk about in that regard. But I'll just say I kind of enjoyed the odd couple-esque pairing of these two and seeing them kind of go up against each other while also having to navigate, there being a new symbiote that's, bonding with a serial killer who wants to, kill everybody. And the CGI wasn't perfect. A lot of this CGI stuff happens at night, and we all know why that happens. Or in the dark, so they can save money and try and mask some of the imperfections in the CGI. But I think by and large, they did a pretty decent job. I do agree that the rating of this film definitely holds it back. For a movie about a serial killer paired with a symbiote who just wants to eat and kill people and spray everything with blood, I don't even know that I saw blood in this movie. And that's not to say that I want my movies to be hyper violent. I don't usually like hyper violence anyway, but just the way that this character is set up. I'll tell you what, we watched the animated pair of episodes today where Carnage is introduced in the animated series, and that's a kid's cartoon, and it was more violent than this movie was, which I think is saying something. So, why that is, I don't know. A lot of people were taking their kids to see this movie when we were coming out. Whole mess of kids were coming out as well. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe they want parents to be able to take their kiddos if they so deem it appropriate. But I really hope that someday, if the circumstances of this character ever change and he can be included in the MCU, maybe we'll get, I don't know, a better version of him. This may be a little closer to, I think, what we would expect from Venom. But being that Disney owns Marvel, and I don't know how off the cuff violent they would really let those movies be, honestly. So soft recommend for me is what I'll leave.
Can you imagine if this movie was made by an independent studio? They could really go crazy and lean into the horror and gore elements of these two creatures. It would be awesome.
So Carnage, it's not what his first appearance in the comics was, just normal first appearance stuff. But his big thing was this 14 issue mega crossover thing that I think is still kind of considered the quintessential story of that character. It's called Maximum Carnage, and he's escaping from prison. He gets hold of this character named Shriek, and the two of them sort of form a little gang of some other people, and then a bunch of heroes led by Spider-Man and Venom team up to fight them. In that, I mean, it's a comic book. Granted, it was a comic book in the I think 90s, but it's not like there was just blood on every single panel. But you can do a lot with implied violence, right? And I think that if you're telling the story of Carnage, who that is his character, I think that you can still, even with the PG-13, I don't necessarily need to see viscera flying out everywhere. Sure, there's probably a good version of that movie that exists too. But you can do a lot with the threat of violence, or you can do a lot with well-placed violence. I even think about things that you mentioned the MCU and how he may not get a chance to do much there. I think about there is a pretty damn violent scene in one of the kind of middle episodes of Falcon and Winter Soldier, where one character just goes absolutely ham on another character. And that was more terrifying, I think, seeing that moment play out than anything that I saw here. And again, there was some blood, but it wasn't can see close up, see teeth flying out and shit like that, you know.
Yeah.
Imagine a scene in this movie where he goes into a room and a bunch of people scream, and then later on the cop shows up and walks in there and just walks out immediately, covering his mouth or something like that. Like, you don't even have to see what's in the room; you just know that he did something like messed up. I don't know. It's hard with this specific character to sort of like play it to squeaky clean, and it feels like such a missed opportunity. I feel like this movie has a villain problem, and that sucks to say.
Agreed. Well, guys, I know we have a second movie we want to talk about, and I do want to make sure we have time to hit spoilers. So how do we feel about making the transition over to Spoiler Town?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So for those of you who have not yet seen Venom, Let There Be Carnage, you continue to listen at your own peril. We're going to spoil the plot of this film pretty heavily as we continue to unpack the film. If you are listening live, feel free to step away for about 15 minutes, then come on back for our Dear Evan Hansen discussion. If you're listening through the magic of digital tape delay on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, however you consume your podcast, feel free to reference the time index in the show notes and skip around as needed. Okay, I'm done giving the warning. Warnings, thing of the past. Spoilers are now fair game. Jim, you mentioned not seeing either of the characters eating somebody. I saw two instances of that. I think that the when Cletus Cassidy is killed at the end, Venom like bites his head off when he's like, "Fuck this guy."
That was the only. Yeah, that was the only one. I think that I
was that the only one. Okay,
I think it was pretty much
because I know.
I mean, there was a tongue down somebody's throat. There was a tongue down somebody's throat earlier on in the prison scene, but yeah,
there was another one, but it was like also sort of like a and I forget the exact moment in the movie, but like it sort of like goes back and goes to Chomp, and then it kind of cuts away. With it's right. implied that he, and, he didn't make it out of that scene.
It's just that I want enough violence to make these characters, these monster characters, feel scary. I mean, they look scary. Carnage looked kind of scary walking around. The CGI, and he was walking through the prison, and the prison scene made him look pretty scary. But I want him to actually be scary. And, have him going around talking about, biting people's heads off, but not actually doing it seems a little falling short in my opinion. The other thing I wanted to mention was we didn't get to see Cletus Cassidy deal with being Carnage much in this film. I mean, we get to see almost a whole movie of Eddie Brock dealing with becoming Venom, but I don't even think we got a scene of Cletus. We saw him become Carnage, no doubt, but we didn't get to see him have that deal. Like, oh my God, now I'm this, alien creature. And what does that mean for me as a serial killer?
Yeah.
And, none of that was there. So
I think part of the reason for that is and Will, feel free to let me know if I'm wrong, but I think Eddie and the Venom symbiote were like fighting against each other as they were kind of finding their footing and becoming Venom, and they were still obviously fighting each other throughout the whole movie. I mean, they separated, they had a divorce for a while, but I think what they were going for with Cletus Cassidy and the Carnage symbiote is Cletus's like murderous impulses fed so much into the Carnage symbiote that they were just a perfect match for each other. They didn't have to spend a lot of time blending or building up. They were just like, they're gonna go on a rampage. So I don't think we needed to see as much of that. Also, I mean, unless it's going to be in a 2.5 hour movie, which I think we agreed the runtime on this was chef's kiss perfect. I don't know how we get those scenes without making it a much longer film.
Yeah, the setup here is sort of like trying to do like a a Dark Mirror style story. You know, like Eddie and Venom have to find equilibrium because they have different needs, but they find that they need to come closer together by the end to accomplish this goal. They need one another. Whereas Carnage and Cletus are born from one another. Carnage is born from the blood of Venom, but also from kind of within Cletus, and has those same impulses, and they should be as one. But really what tears them apart later on is when they realize they do have some differing goals, specifically as they pertain to Shriek. So they pull apart as Eddie and Venom pull together. That's what they're going for. I think they accomplished like that part of it. I think where it struggles a little bit is, and I keep going back to this, but the Woody Harrelson was just not the choice here. I think that when they do switch over and we see Cletus, I never felt like terrified of Woody Harrelson in this. Imagine if the same part, and nothing against Woody Harrelson, nothing against him. You know, I've loved him in some movies, but imagine this exact same role played by someone like Jackie Earle Haley. Remember seeing him in like The Nightmare on Elm Street or Rorschach?
Bad News Bears.
You know, yeah. Well, Bad News
when
Bears.
He was 12.
He plays like a really good, like, terrifying serial killer. You know, if someone like him was in that role, God, that would terrify me to know that guy now has a symbiote. Like, oh, there's a worse version of him now. Oh my God. So. Woody Harrelson was the name. He probably, you know, and I get that that's the appeal. And sometimes it's fun to take a big swing on an unconventional casting decision. We've seen it work out really well. Heath Ledger as the Joker is one of the best examples of that ever. I just think this one was a huge whiff.
No offense to the 60s Batman show, but I felt like when we were watching Woody Harrelson, not all carnaged up, he was like a 60s Batman villain. Like, he should have been in Dutch Angle anytime he was on screen.
Yeah.
I mean, he's chewing scenery. He's you know, he's doing his job,
acting crazy.
He never comes across to me as like menacing or chilling or, you know. And again, I hate to keep coming back to this. Obviously, the animated Spider-Man series from the 90s is not the be all end all. There's so many comics that I have never read, but when a cartoon version of the villain back in the 90s, when everything was just so like toned down in a lot of ways, for that character to be more menacing and chilling than like a movie version where they spend, you know, $70 million making this villain, I think that's a problem.
I would strongly, I sent you the link over kind of on the side, Brad, but like, I would strongly recommend anyone that wants to know where to get started with the character of Carnage. They're trade paperbacks for it everywhere. They reprint this thing all the time because it's one of the more popular Marvel stories. It's called Maximum Carnage. It's a 14-issue book, so it's like, you know, one of those like sort of beefy graphic novels, but it's more or less a self-contained story with just all of these different heroes all bouncing off of this serial killer on a serial killing spree, and it's really damn good. It's really damn good. It's definitely of its time. That there's a certain aesthetic that happened in the 90s with comics, but I would strongly recommend checking that out. If you're a fan of the character Carnage, that's not the reason to watch this movie. I think the reason you watch this movie is because I think there is a fun dynamic at play between Eddie Brock and Venom that isn't always perfect, but it's interesting. It's always interesting.
And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure Tom Hardy works as a comedic character either. A lot of the times, you know, I have an issue with that dissonance of like Tom Hardy, who I see as a great dramatic actor, trying to yuck it up with his alter ego. You know, I don't know, it didn't always click for me.
I think that's fair. I mean, you know me, comedy is a super weird thing for me. I'm usually out of lock and step with everybody else. I actually enjoyed a lot of the comedy from Tom Hardy. I think he's got good physicality with his comedy too, but I think the jokes go too long and too far, and that's part of the problem. Like a one-liner or like a quick physical thing, and then it's over and done. Okay, but I mean, like Venom hitting Eddie 4 or 5 times, you know, just to be funny. It's just like, okay, We get it. Can we move on, please?
We got this in the first movie.
Right.
I almost wanted to see at one point like Venom like kind of split his tongue into two parts, like he's gonna try to poke Eddie in the eyes, and then like Eddie blocks it with his hands, Three Stooges style.
Yeah. I have two more things I would personally like to talk about real quick. I know we have another movie, but one, for the next Venom movie, can we pretty please not have Venom fighting another symbiote? He fought Riot in the first one. He fought Carnage in this one. I'd really like to see him go up against someone who is not the same.
I think, at least in that regards, and we are in spoilers, I think it's fair to say, I think wish granted.
Yep, and that leads into the second thing I wanted to talk about, which is, of course, the mid-credits scene where, poof, Venom is now in the MCU. What?
That means that we are more than likely going to see in December to see this character show up in the new Spider-Man movie, since that movie is going to be all about a big multiversal like mishmash combination of a lot of things, like sort of into the Spider-Verse, both the comics and the animated movie.
Is that what you guys got out of that mid-credit scene? Because for me, it was all about that hot dad bod guy coming out of the shower. That was it. That was it. That was where it was at for me. Like, I was like, fuck the Spider-Man shit. I'm all over this guy.
A giant hairy chest on the screen. Believe me, my eyes were on it. But I was excited to see that moment where Eddie, changes universes. What that means in terms of, does he go back to his own universe at some point? Do the universes get merged somehow? I have no idea. I'm sure that's all going to be handled in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, perhaps. But I'm totally digging the idea of seeing Tom Holland Spider-Man up against Tom Hardy Venom. It'll be Tom versus Tom.
And they did something super clever in this movie that I do want to give them credit for, because they know that they were building up to that, right? Like that was the big moment that people were going to be talking about afterwards. And they did the reveal by, of course, there's like the room changes and someone walks in, but most specifically on television, we see the Daily Bugle, which is a televised, like almost like Alex Jones style show in the MCU, where the J. Jonah Jameson sort of like spouts like hatred and vitriol and at the screen. Earlier in the movie, a character is sitting there holding the Daily Bugle, which is a newspaper in Venom's universe, and kind of it pans on that for just a moment as he's doing it. So they really set up like, even this is different here by showing us kind of the switch from the one to the other. So kudos to them for that. They knew what their conversation point was going to be, and they planted a seed for it earlier in the film.
I think it was just a little confusing how it happened, though. I feel really bad. Someone who was going in to see the next showing of Venom got spoiled in the hallway by a group having a conversation about this as they were walking in, to go to their showing. But it got me thinking. Initially, I had thought that Venom showing Eddie knowledge of the universes or whatever is what triggered him universe hopping. But I guess it has something to do with the events of Loki and the whole timeline thing. That part I'm not totally clear on how that happened.
I can help slightly with that. So what we're going to see so this whole phase of the MCU is all about multiversal stuff. We got to see it play out in the Loki show. We know that Doctor Strange is Multiverse of Madness. And we've gotten to see the preview for the new Spider-Man movie, where he basically, in the trailer, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't spoil it. But he goes to the Doctor Strange and is like, hey, I need you to fix this, man. Like, can you fix this for me? And they do something. Like, it looks like Peter does something, and it creates some, like, multiversal fractions. And that's why we have, like, Doc Ock from Spider-Man 2, the Alfred Molina character, is showing up, and like, you know, a bunch of other people from the other movies are supposed to be in it, possibly, maybe. But so I think that this is less to do with like any action that Venom took, and this is more just sort of like this happened in conjunction with this thing that's going to happen later on in this other movie. So just sort of like a little like a little appetizer before we get to that later on.
Totally. But why did Venom like lick the TV screen and say that guy? Like, it seemed like Venom somehow knew Spider-Man. I don't know. It was really confusing.
His head.
Well, I'm sure we'll get to see a little bit more of that. That's too specific a seed to plant to not like see something blossom from it.
Yeah. Well, either way, it was interesting to see Venom universe hop, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what they do with that now that they can apparently use Venom like they've been using Spider-Man. They're still separate properties, though, right? There hasn't been a deal to transfer them wholly, right?
Yeah, as far as I know, like it's like the same with like Morbius, who is sort of doing his own thing. I wonder if. So Venom appeared in Spider-Man 3. Granted, that was Topher Grace playing him, but maybe there's some sort of like link between that Venom and this Venom, like not the Eddie Brock part, but maybe the symbiotes picking up memories of the other symbiote, or maybe they explain it that way. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. Things
are starting to mesh and get kind of weird in this like weird multiversal stuff. So who knows? All rules are out the window. They can do whatever bullshit they want, and it'll technically like it's sort of like review proof in some ways. We're gonna get here and go like, it didn't make sense when these multiverses clashed.
Well, did it?
Yeah.
Or did it?
Well, fellas, any final thoughts on Venom? Let There Be Carnage before we wrap this one up.
I mean, again, one of the better gay movies that's come out this year, especially big blockbuster. So,
which were the gay relationships that you think kind of leapt off the screen to you, Will? Was it Eddie and Venom? Yeah, Eddie and Venom for sure.
Yeah, Eddie and Venom. Yeah, like that. I mean, even like there's even a line where like when Venom goes off by himself and is like kind of like raving at the club and is sort of like, yeah, I'm free of Eddie. It's like feels like triumphant, like
a breakup.
I don't need him anymore. And he even says, I'm out of Eddie's closet. Like, okay, like that was such a clumsy, obvious line there.
Right. That was cute though. I did get those vibes from them. Kind of this like, you know, it's odd, just like The Odd Couple, right? I mean, a lot of people when The Odd Couple was a thing were like speculating, did Oscar and God help me out, Oscar and no, the Odd Couple on
Felix,
Oscar and Felix. Did they have, they lived together, they made a home together. They were kind of a veiled gay but straight relationship, right? In a lot of people's minds. So I think this movie was going for that a little bit. And it was fun to kind of see them play in that space a little.
Well, Venom did tell Eddie, I love you. And then Eddie kind of said it back. So,
They, as part of their, they decided to go on a honeymoon together after getting back together.
It was the most romantic beach scene I've seen in a couple years. So there you go.
Venom 3, even gayer than Carnage.
Nice. All right. Well, Jim, Will, are you ready to talk Dear Evan Hansen?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm ready.
Okay.
You guys are in for a surprise.
I realized that jumping from a superhero, supervillain movie to a musical about a young man coming of age that could also be a supervillain is a little weird, but we're going to make that jump. For those of you who need to hear this, we're going to talk about Dear Evan Hansen, spoiler free, for about 15 minutes, and then we'll rip off that Band-Aid. We'll let the blood that is spoilers gush all over. That was dark. Brad, you're weird. Anyway, we'll protect you from spoilers. We'll give you a fair warning before we go there. Will's making a face at me. I know. That was bizarre, but we're gonna do it. So, all of that said, here we go. Our discussion of Dear Evan Hansen. All right, so Jim, as we mentioned at the outset of the show, we are going to have a discussion. Who's the bigger monster? Carnage, Venom, Dear Evan Hansen. But we obviously need the setup. We need to discuss this film before we can answer that question with finality. So if you don't mind giving us the setup of this film and just telling us a little bit about what you thought. Was this worth seeing in theaters? Should you go the streaming route when available? What did you think?
Well, yeah, I'm going to give you guys the setup for the movie, but as a special treat, I'm going to sing it. Are you ready?
Oh,
yes, God, yes.
Okay, here we go. Evan Hansen is an anxious, isolated high school kid, and he's aching for understanding and belonging amid the cruelty of high school life in this social media age. So he decides to lie and pretend he's a close friend of a tragically dead classmate and goes on a journey of false self-discovery while gaslighting everyone in his life, including the family of the dead kid. So he's able to be liked and make the dead guy's sister his girlfriend.
Can we have a Jim Pugliafico musical? Bravo! Bravo. That was good.
That's the story of Evan Hansen. I will not sing my whole review, though. Oh, man, that was awful. That was suitably awful.
No, that was good. That was good. And I mean, for a musical film, I think a musical setup is what we need. Right. Given your joyous musical performance just moments ago, yes. Were your thoughts on the movie equally as joyous?
Real quick.
Go ahead.
I want to just real quick before we get off of the singing. If anyone that's listening now or later wants to sing their rendition of Jim's song, I would love to hear some audience submissions too. Like, I would love to make that a thing. Anyways, go ahead, Jim.
If I had more time, it would have made more sense musically and lyrically, but this is what you whip up in 5 minutes.
That's so good.
When a non-songwriter writes stuff. Anyway, yeah, so this one is directed by Steven Chbosky. I don't know that name very well. This one, of course, is based on the stage musical play written by Justin Paul and Benj Pasek, who also wrote the music for the original. And this is a musical movie as well, I would say. It's not a musical in the sense that everything in the movie is sung, but I would say there are, somewhere between a half dozen and a dozen musical songs that are woven into this story. And it's interesting. I did not see the Broadway musical at all. I did watch clips of it on YouTube after talking to Will about learning about, I forget what the name of that is, but I did watch some of it, and it's weird. I got a totally different vibe from the clips that I saw watching it on, filmed live on a stage versus what the kind of the tone that the movie gave us. This movie is not good, and it's not good because in my mind, because it has a very problematic central plot or central story and central character. Some might say it's a very unlikable character based on his actions, right? And it's just weird. The movie is not terribly, I don't believe the movie's terribly made. I think the presentation of the musical numbers is fine. There's some fun stuff in this movie that looks pretty good. We'll talk about Ben Platt a lot, I'm sure. He plays the title character, Evan Hansen. He also played the character on stage, I guess. And I think his dad produced the movie or produces the play or something. And there was a lot of talk about that. But I'll be honest with you. Once you trick your mind into saying he's really not a 30-something-year-old college, high school student, I thought the performance was fine. I mean, it's a very affected performance, but I think the character's supposed to be that way. And for a lot of it, I was able to suspend my disbelief, even knowing that he was very old, to kind of play that part. And he's certainly not the first 30-something to play a high school student in a movie. That happens all the time, and it happened here. The rest of the cast, I think, is okay. I mean, Amy Adams is fine here. Caitlin Dever as the girlfriend, Zoe Murphy is fine, and Julianne Moore as his mother is okay here. And nobody really stands out. There's no award-winning performances in this one. I think there's a lot of people who are going to like this movie. I think general audiences are going to go for this movie a lot more than people who might want to kind of dissect the story in this movie. Because if you do peek under the cover a little bit and kind of dive into, hey, what's really going on in the story, you're like, oh my God, is he doing what I think he's doing? Because it's very odd. The whole movie, I'm like, is he going to get away with this? Because I didn't know the end. I didn't know how it ended. I'm like, how far is this going to go? Like, he just keeps doing layer after layer after layer without any seemingly any remorse that came to. But anyway, I'm going to say I think this movie is worth seeing for the conversation. I don't think it's a great movie. You're not going to hear a lot about it. At the end of, I don't think it's the worst movie I ever saw. It's certainly not the worst made movie I ever saw. But it is very problematic the way it's presented and I never got the sense that this movie was trying to convince me that the character was doing a good thing, or that he was, I guess the movie tried to convince me that he wasn't a good person most of the way along the movie. And that's kind of where I ended up. So I was very conflicted. I would say that if you're going to recommend it to family members, they may love it. But I was probably on the other side of the fence, and I didn't like it all that much.
All right. Well, thank you for weighing in on that one, Jim. Will, how about for you?
Yeah. So, first of all, the thing Jim was talking about, there are these, you can go on YouTube, and if you search for slime tutorials with the name of a Broadway show before it, you can usually find bootlegs under that name, which I'm generally not a fan of, like, bootlegging stuff. Pay for a thing if you can get it, but a lot of Broadway shows, you cannot see it unless you live in certain cities. So I understand the reason for it. So that's where I've seen Dear Evan Hansen before. I've seen bootlegs. The musical itself has some issues with its core conceit. Basically this young guy gets caught up in this lie and it spirals out of control, and it ultimately does a lot of good for a lot of people while also doing a lot of harm or potential harm to a more targeted group. And it sort of weighs like, is the greater good worth it or not? And it sort of works there because when Ben Platt originated that role, he was younger and he appeared younger, and you could see him as like a very innocent character who got swept away by something. I think the biggest problem with this is they really should have recast this role. And I know that they wanted to like honor Ben Platt, who originated the role, and also because of the family ties, and because this was, I think, thought of to be a project that was supposed to catapult Platt into like Oscar territory. I think they wanted to keep him in that thing. I think instead it's probably set back his career, which is unfortunate. But there's so much about this movie that feels like it doesn't work because of the character's age, because he doesn't come across as innocent. He comes across as creepy. He doesn't come across as swept up in something. He comes across as someone who's sort of scheming on something, and that sucks. The songs don't sound as good as they sound in the musical because they used like that same live singing technique they used with Les Mis, the Russell Crowe Les Mis movie. And I feel like that approach tends to get you can get some raw performances out of people, but you also get some really clumsy performances out of people too. Ben Platt's voice does these weird cracks through here, and I don't think they always sound like they're emotive. I think they sound like they're the effects of like multiple takes of trying to get this thing right. And that's just the Ben Platt stuff. They also the story decentralizes the story, or let me rephrase that. It re-centralizes the story of Evan. There are several spots in the original Broadway show that are designed to show kind of the interior thoughts of some of the other characters, specifically Evan's mom, who I would argue is that the Heidi Hansen character is sort of the heart and soul of what Dear Evan Hansen should be, but they trim her part down to its bare bones here. I think two of the best songs in the entire Broadway musical that both feature that character are completely trimmed out of this entirely. And so what you end up missing is other characters' perspectives on what Evan is doing. Like, you don't get the other characters saying, I am having a problem reaching my son, or fuck this guy for doing what he just did to me. You know, you don't get that. So you don't feel the consequences. You don't feel the stakes. You don't feel the, like, this is a character who let something get away from them. It's on page. It technically appears here, but you don't feel it because it's only viewed from Evan's perspectives. And because it's only viewed from Evan's perspective, we look at it in the film from a perspective of, why don't these people understand what's happening to Evan? And I think that's a problem. I think that is a huge problem. I think this movie is probably being a bit of a punching bag in the way that like Cats was. I think every year we have to have like the one that everyone beats up on. I don't think this is not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not the worst movie I've seen this year. Space Jam exists. But all of that aside from all of that said, I feel like all the characters here are totally underutilized. Julianne Moore should have had a stronger part. Amy Adams, those songs gets cut too, so you don't get to see as much from Cynthia. You don't get to learn as much about even the Connor character. He is less a central part of this than he should be. I think the only character that I think feels strong here is I actually was a big fan of the Zoe performance by Caitlin Dever. We saw her in Booksmart. I think that it's almost like she picked up the rest of this movie, put it on her shoulders, and trudged uphill to just like keep some momentum going. Like, I give her all the credit in the world for like the things that work in this film. Again, nothing against the other actors. God, it's even hard to like slam this director too much. He's the guy that did Perks of Being a Wallflower, which was good. I don't know. It's just this should have been better than it was. And I think that everyone's going to take a hit, maybe except for Amy Adams and Julianne Moore. But I think everyone's going to take a hit with their careers because of this, and that sucks.
Yeah. Unfortunate. Will, just to absolutely clarify, though, recommend or no?
Oh, yeah. When I said it's not the worst movie I've seen of the year, that does not also that doesn't translate into a recommend. It is still no.
All right. Well, thank you for clarifying. I got to say, this movie isn't terrible for me. I think it's well made. I think it's put together fine. I think it's, I don't know, standard fare. As a musical, the music just didn't grab me at all, except for, I guess, one song, which we'll talk about in spoilers. But there's another female character that is a sympathetic person towards Evan, and gets involved with things. She's in the trailer, so I hope I'm not tipping my hat too much. But she had a song that I resonated with a lot. Maybe we can talk about some of the more specifics with the music when we get to spoilers. But by and large, the rest of the music just, I don't know, it didn't trip any of my triggers. And then, despite this not being a terrible movie, despite this movie being well put together, I did not like the Evan Hansen character at all. And it made it really difficult for me to get emotionally hooked into what he was going through, the situation that he was in. I cared more about the people that he was gaslighting than I cared about him as a character. And I think without getting into spoilers, I think this movie tries to walk the line of making him a relatable character and someone that you maybe want to also root for. But for me, it full stop did not work at all. And I'm constantly, with everything he does in this movie, like wanting to shout at the screen,
Stop!
"You dumb fuck, stop already!" Like, oh man. But at the same time, how many people in our real lives have made really bad decisions and done really stupid things, and that you wish you could just grab them by the collar and shake them? I mean, realistically, it does happen, but I think I don't know. It didn't work for me. I didn't care enough about the main character to really get invested. I wanted to see a whole lot more of Amy Adams and Julianne Moore. I didn't even know that they had additional songs. I haven't seen the Broadway play, but I just felt like, God, could we not have had more of them, please? But yeah, it's just not a good one for me. Will, there's a comment directed to you in the chat from Kevin Walding, who says, Will, stop overthinking it. You're ruining it. It's called entertainment. You didn't produce it. Stop the Monday morning quarterbacking. I feel like it's fair to say we can have opinions about things. Yes?
Right.
Maybe?
Right.
I mean, literally, like this is a show where it's a bunch of guys just talking about movies. Like, if we didn't Monday morning quarterback movies, there'd be no show. There'd be no conversations outside of the movie. Like when I go outside, when I go to a movie with my friends and walk out of it, and we say, "Gosh, I really loved this," or "Man, I really hated this," or "Man, what do you think this meant?" Like, those conversations are part of the experience. It's part about enjoying art, is sometimes knowing that sometimes a piece doesn't work and to explore why that piece doesn't work. You know, I believe very strongly in the idea of every movie is a miracle. And I think that that's absolutely true. You know, every movie takes hundreds upon hundreds of people over hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of hours to try to create this thing. But at the end of the day, we're all consumers with our X number of dollars that went to go see the thing, and we have opinions about them, and we're going to discuss them. Do I wish ill on these people? No, I'm a fan of Ben Platt before this. I hope that something pivots for his career going forward. But that said, as a human being with an opinion, I didn't like this one. So I'm sorry if you liked Kevin. I'm sorry if you liked it more than I did. I'm happy that you liked it more than I did. I wish that I liked it as much as you did.
Right. And the issue here is that, like, when we were watching the Broadway play clip, or the portion of it that I saw, a lot of the stuff that Evan was, his character seemed a little bit more, and his actions were a little bit, taken kind of with some laughter, like almost as it was being played a little bit for comedy. I did see that part of the play, and this movie had a much more serious tone, and it almost, I couldn't tell if it wanted us to get behind the character Evan Hansen. And I'm just saying that the movie, even though it may have been trying that, did not succeed, because I could not get behind this character. And like you, Brad, at every turn, I'm like, stop the fuck what you're doing. Like, somebody needs to call this guy out. His friend was, in on the deal. Didn't say anything. It just felt really weird to me that the movie wanted me, I think, to kind of empathize with its main character. And I just could not do it. And I think that's where the dissonance came from me in this film. I will agree with you guys. The performance and character that I really liked, and her at least one of her musical moments was the highlight for me, was Amandla Stenberg, right? As Alana Beck. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in spoilers, but I thought that stood out. And
I think one of the things that works really well about her specifically was, if you compare and contrast against the Broadway show, they give her a little bit more to do here. She has a similar role in the Broadway show, but they really explore. In fact, the song that you like so much, Brad, That's actually original to this movie.
Oh,
that was,
wow.
You know how a lot of movies will do that thing, and this is just like, again, inside baseball for anyone. Almost anytime they make a musical adaptation of whatever Broadway show into a movie, there's usually at least one original song, and that's so that can qualify at awards for the music categories, which tend to feature originally written songs. So that's sort of the idea. That's the goal. And sometimes it's also there just to sort of like add a little bit of extra depth to a character they want to push forward a little bit. So you can kill two birds with one stone. So I'm excited to hear you say that, because I do think that Alana, I don't think the actress had as much like to do in the movie, but I think that she did a good job with what she did. And I think the character did definitely have, I don't know, a little bit more of like some claws to sort of sink into this story. Yeah, there's a better version of this movie that has to exist. That's my problem. Like, I think the story itself is compelling. You get lost in a lie, and you have to figure out how to get out of it when you know that lie will crush people, and you know that lie is helping other people. That is a very, very compelling story, and it has been told very compellingly. It just, they didn't capture that. They didn't capture that, put it on film, and project it onto that screen.
It didn't land for you, and that's okay. That it didn't. I think a lot of people are enjoying this movie, and I think that's fantastic. But I think it's still fair to say that maybe something didn't work as well as it could have for us. I do want to make sure we have time to talk spoilers. So why don't we go ahead if you guys are ready? I'm seeing some head nods. Let's make that jump. If you've not yet seen Dear Evan Hansen, the film, which is what we're specifically talking about, and you don't want to be spoiled on this movie's plot, now's your chance to step away. If you want to come back in about 15 minutes for our wrap up with Who's the Bigger Monster, feel free to do so. Otherwise, we'll see y'all maybe next episode if you need to bow out. But spoilers are officially fair game. I want to start with that Alana song. Obviously, having not seen the Broadway version, I had no idea that this was an original song. But of all the songs in this film, that was the one that hit me the most. That was the one time during this whole movie that I cried. And I think it's because I relate a lot to what that song is about. Hiding behind, accomplishments and achievements so people don't see the not so great parts of you. It was powerful. That was a very powerful moment. Did you guys react to that the same way at all? Did it land for you?
I did. There's an interiority to that I think resonates well, right? Like, we get to see what's going on inside of that character, and we get to see how it bounces on and off of like what Evan is going through. And I think that it showcases what is one of the core theses of the story, is that all of us, to some degree or another, some big, some small, but all of us feel these like insecurities and doubts, and we feel like we're the only one who experiences them, and we feel like we're sort of like trapped in this little prison of our own making. And it leads into some of the other things as they start to discover that about each other. It later on opens up, and the characters, across the world, viral, people start to connect with one another through this message of like, you will be found, and stuff like that comes up in a later song. So I think that in some ways it makes the You Will Be Found song stronger, because it almost feels like it's sort of like the first pebble throw that causes the ripples that cause that other song to grow.
Yeah, it's almost like we learned more about her character and her issues and kind of what makes her character tick in that one song, in that one scene, than we did about Evan, like almost in the whole movie. And that's kind of a shame. I'm trying to figure out, did Evan's actions, who did they help in this movie? Who did they really help at the end of the movie?
Are you just to clarify? Are you asking, like, by the end of the film, credits roll, who was helped by his actions, or who was helped before? Okay, gotcha.
Yes, who was helped by his actions?
I think
maybe he was trying to help somebody, throughout the movie, but But by the end of the movie, when everything was said and done, who actually was helped? And maybe that's the message of the movie. Like, I don't know. You can do bad things to try to help people, but in the end, it doesn't work.
I would argue that I think a lot of people were helped in this, right? Like, I think that like we see that the family in their own the Murphy family. Gosh, I'm going to defend this movie. The Murphys like all feel more connected to Connor, whose loss was such a. They had felt separated from Connor for so many years that they knew that they had lost him, but they also felt like they had lost him long before, and they were coping with sort of like the dissonance between those two emotions. And at least through this, they feel as though they have something of Connor. Not the stories. The stories are bullshit. They find out that the stories are bullshit.
It's built on a pile of sand, right?
It is built on that. But what they're able to find is they find closure in their relationships with one another and through building the orchard and through knowing that the message that Evan puts out into the world that goes viral, even though, again, it's built on bullshit, does actively help people. And I think that the message of this movie isn't if you tell a lie, bad things will happen. It's not if you tell a lie, good things will happen. It's everyone feels these insecurities and we should be open to talking about them, told through the lens of a character who's caught in a spiral of a lie. I don't think that you have to look at this movie from the perspective of outcome must be good or bad because action is good or bad. I think the two are almost slightly divorced from one another. And can be explored separately. They didn't do a great job of it, but I do at least think that there was a lot of positive that came out of this within the confines of the movie itself. That's
and on top of that, I think about the kids at the school, who never paid attention to Connor, who did not know Connor. In the end, through the actions of Evan, yes, he lied. Yes, that was a bad thing. Like, people were kind of opening up. Right, their eyes were kind of opening, right, to what was going on with each other. It's a complicated, messy, sticky thing, and I don't know that there's an easy answer. I believe some good did, in the end, come from it. The Murphy family goes to the orchard every weekend, the sister says now. Right, every Sunday, I think she said they now go. So there's something there, but obviously there has to be some kind of atonement, maybe. Yeah. I think that's where this falters a little.
I mean, the orchard is kind of a good key for me to think about. Like, at the end of the movie, we have an orchard. The orchard benefited from all the web of lies that Evan was telling, right? Because they raised money based on that whole mess of like untruths and a story that he basically told. Connor didn't give a fuck about trees or the orchard. I mean,
no, Connor did. That was something. Yeah, that was like we found out that was.
The parents said that he he went with them, right? To the orchard, right?
And that and all of them had good memories of that orchard.
But wasn't it Evan who said, like, oh, and he also used to tell me how he loved it there and blah blah blah.
They did say that as a kid, Connor loved going there a lot. That they would go there a lot. So at least one point in time, from the family's perspective, he loved it, which is why they made that mental leap to when Evan is talking about going to a forest. They were like, oh, that must mean the orchard. Is that what you're talking about? And then Evan fed into that from there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And I think that that's fair. When you lose someone, which, I mean, all three of us have. All three of us have experienced that in our lives, and it's sucks. And you look back and you question the moments, and that's just a natural thing. And when I say you question the moments, you look back and go like, this was really important to me. Why was it important to me? Was it as important to them? And you start to sort of like build these narratives about that moment, which was probably, for Connor at the time as a kid, just a good day in an orchard. And it's now, and it can be just a good day at an orchard. And To the family, it's now taken on more significance. And I think the movie is sort of saying that's okay. You know, it's okay to take these moments of normalcy and build them up into something that we hold on to and that we cherish.
He did partially redeem himself at the end by doing the research to find the video clip of Connor and the guitar. That was kind of cool. I really like that moment. I don't know if it totally redeems the character by the end, but I just, if the movie wanted me as the viewer to see how, these kids were hurting and we're going to try to fix the situation, it just missed the mark for me. And maybe the musical play hit it better, but I thought the movie just didn't hit that target for me.
I think there are stronger versions of this, and that's the thing that gets me the most. I think about just in terms of musicals, there's everybody's talking about Jamie. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch that yet.
It's not.
Pretty fresh out. It's on Amazon. It's based off of like a West End musical, and the idea there is it's like the only he's the it's like a small town in England, and this kid wants to get into doing drag, and that's his like thing, but it's also something that he doesn't want to have to do, and because he knows that it's going to cause him some problems. And so there's a lot of songs, like the I Want song and the I don't know if I should song and all of those types of things. And he kind of like ventures out, and he suffers from some pretty tough experiences at school because of that, but he also builds some bonds and kind of overcomes some stuff along the way. And it just felt like a more purposeful version of the story that it was trying to tell. And that's where I would recommend people look. Like, I think that's a stronger version, again, not of the same story, but of this sort of like musical coming of age, dealing with like the internal fears and of letting ourselves be known to the world. I think that's a stronger version of this.
Okay.
All right. Any final thoughts on Dear Evan Hansen before we move on?
I mentioned the songs that were cut, but the kind of briefly, but I do recommend, and Brad, I'll send you some videos afterwards. There's the first one is called "Does Anybody Have a Map?" It's the song that opens the show, and it's, instead of it starting with Evan
through a window,
sort of like, so the movie starts with Evan sort of like wistfully staring out the window and singing that song, right? And the play, which I think is a stronger version of it, it starts with both Cynthia and Heidi checking in on their kids, and both of them having, in different ways, like bad motherly reactions. Like they don't get what they want from it. And so they sing the song about like, I can't connect with my kid. Does anybody have a map? How am I supposed to do this? And it's really good. And it gives us sort of that segue to where, when the characters of Evan and Connor later meet, and Connor like is kind of a dick to Evan, that's when he starts singing the song about like, looking through a window. And so it makes that moment have more, plus there's another song called Good For You, and it's literally Heidi, Alana, and Jared, three characters that I think needed more to do in this movie. They're all singing. It's basically like, good for you, Evan. It's a fuck you song. It's a kind of about the moment where things start falling
apart. Look what you did, right?
Look what you did. And it's great because, not because they're slamming on this kid, but because we get to see how the actions affected other people before he comes to terms with trying to fix it. And I think that's important. So Brad, I would recommend you check both those out. I think you'll actually like, I think they're good songs too.
I definitely will. It sounds like they would have helped me to more emotionally connect, I think, with what was going on, rather than just through the lens of, Evan and what he was doing. Because there were times where I was questioning his friend Jared's choices to like help him do this thing. And I'm like, was Jared looking down on him for doing what he's doing when Jared helped him to like spoof the emails? Like, I wanted more of that. I wanted to dig into that a little bit. And so it sounds like maybe there's a little more there for me than was maybe in the film. That's good to know. All right. Well, sounds like we have exhausted our conversation on Dear Evan Hansen. We're going to go ahead and close the book on that conversation. As we look up to wrap, things here in the next few minutes. We do have just a little bit of fun. This is tongue in cheek. This is totally in jest. But a question was posed: who's the bigger monster, Evan Hansen or Carnage and Venom? Again, just for fun. But what do you guys think?
I'm trying to equate Evan Hansen's monster phase. So here's the thing, right? I think, do all villains feel like they're doing good in the, you know what I mean, in the world? Because like Evan probably felt like he was trying to help the family. I mean, he was also liking the attention he was getting from Zoe for sure. So that was a little weird because he's like, okay, is he doing this because he likes getting attention from the girl that he likes, or is he doing it really to help her family and getting good graces with Zoe? So in that case, that's a little villain-like, right? I mean, you know, doing those things that you know are wrong in order to get something for yourself. I don't know if he was his actions were fully altruistic there, but so that's where I think Evan's villainness comes from. Is he a bigger villain than? Oh, we can't use Carnage, right? This is just Venom and Evan.
No, we can totally use Carnage.
Can we? Can we?
Yeah.
I think Evan is right in between Carnage and Venom. That's where I put them.
All right.
My ranking of villains is Carnage is the worst, then Evan, at least through 80% of the movie, and then Venom.
All right.
Look, I'm probably kinder on this in that regard. like realistically, like it's a fun joke. It is because
it's having fun with it.
You know, when you look at it from like an on paper perspective, like, you know, the actions that Evan does are pretty shitty, and that's a fair way of reading it. But at the same time, like when you really dig into the context of it, you know, I think we've all been that character at one time in our lives who we told a white lie because we thought that it was going to like help someone out, and then it ended up becoming a bigger thing and it spiraled, and then we felt like we were now locked in that moment because now it would hurt them too much to do it. And granted, this takes it to like a bigger extreme, you know, hell, it goes viral, and so it's now out there in front of everyone. But I don't think, you know, there are moments where Evan is doing things for selfish reasons, because he's a human being and he's a shitty teenager, and all teenagers are a little shitty and do things like that sometimes. That's just normal, right? He starts realizing that people are paying attention to him, and he lets that get to his head. But literally every movie that has a protagonist that goes through something like this has that moment of like, you know, think about like Disney's Hercules. You know, we don't call him a monster, even though like, you know, he got built up on like endorsement deals and stuff like that and sort of lost focus on who he was. Evan's just a kid who let things spiral, and yeah, there's some bad things in there, and you know, we need to call those things out as bad, but he's just a kid who, you know, who let things go too far. Carnage is a serial killer who enjoyed killing up until the point where it affected specifically him and his girlfriend. There's no contest there. Venom, right in the middle. So okay. I mean, yeah, okay. I'm gonna take the controversial take of saying Carnage was the worse monster than Evan Hansen, but I still love the question.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
For me, it all comes down to intention. Evan did not intend to have more hurt happen as a result of his actions. Yes, Jim, he did benefit from what he was doing, but I think initially, in the moment where it happened, he was honestly trying to like do something that he thought was going to help people who were in crisis, who were in need. So I'm going to put Evan at the most good side, with Carnage at the end and then Venom in the middle as well. I think Venom straddles that line, but I absolutely can see, Jim, how you would maybe put Evan in the middle instead, because yes, you know, like making it with the dead kids' girlfriends because of false sympathy and false stories, that just feels icky and gross, you know? So I totally get that. But his intention was maybe more altruistic than the inaction of his actions.
Yeah. I mean, the way I see it, like Evan didn't eat any people, but neither did Venom. So I guess, you know, that's why, you know.
Can we eat the bad guys?
No.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, this has been a fun show. I'm so glad that we were able to get together and talk about these two films tonight. We are lucky to live in a world, even with a pandemic still raging, where we're still continuing to get films. Maybe they don't all land for us. Maybe they do as people. That's okay. But I'm really glad we still have movies to see and talk about. When I think about our show, I always think about just gabbing outside of a movie theater at South by Southwest, or, Will, when you come to visit and we go see a Marvel movie or something, just gabbing about.
Gosh, what did we see last time? Detective Pikachu?
Yeah. All right. Oh, let's not even talk about that movie.
Yeah.
But I really value that we still have the ability to get together like this and chat with folks with us who are in the live chat. Thank you to everybody tonight who was part of our conversation. Thanks for dropping your thoughts in the chat and sharing those with us. Mm-hmm. We will see you all next week for the newest installment of the James Bond franchise. Looking forward to that conversation. Jim, where can people catch up with you between now and then?
You can catch me on Twitter at JJP Out West. That was my initials, JJP, and the words Out West all together. That's where I like to talk about movies and stuff. And then you can also find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Puliafco. Not Dear Jim Puliafco.
I noticed that. That was awesome.
I didn't catch that. Good job.
Yeah. Catch me on Facebook or catch me at Facebook. If it's still, if it's still a thing by next week, you can catch me on Facebook. But Twitter should still be running because Twitter is the rock.
All right. Will, how about you?
You can find me on Twitter. I don't post there a ton nowadays, but I'm at whatever cove there. You can find me on Facebook as well. I'm William Lindis there. And you can also find me on Letterboxd. I rate and review movies when I see them there, put them into little lists. It's a lot of fun. Just look for William Lindis there. Give me a follow. I'd love to follow you back.
All right. Excellent. Thanks, Will. And folks, you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one that likely has Chub Chaser Bear friends in common with you. You can also find me on Twitter at iBradPro. Thanks so much for joining us this week, everybody. We'll see you all next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.